20 years ago, Jacob Harper was a young man brimming with ambition and dreams. He had married his high school sweetheart, Sarah, and together they embarked on the journey of building a family. Over the course of 4 years, yes, 4 years, they welcomed 10 beautiful children into their lives, turning their small house upside down. At first, Jacob was happy with his big family, but that quickly changed. Jacob could no longer be the father he wanted to be, so he left. 20 years went by and Jacob wanted to make his wrongs right, only to find out a lot can change in 20 years. He made a shocking discovery when he arrived at his ex-wife's house. Something he didn't think could happen. It made him rethink his decision to come here. Was leaving his wife and children the right thing to do all along? But why does Jacob want to look for his wife and kids? What shocking discovery will he find, and will he be able to move on? But before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. I know what you might think, 10 children in 4 years. How could that even be possible? Well, Jacob was thinking the same. Their first child was a beautiful girl named Violet. Within 2 months after Violet's birth, Sarah got pregnant again, but this time with triplets. This was the beginning of the end. 7 children under the age of 5 would sound like hell to most people, but Sarah was ecstatic. She truly wanted to have a big family, and although the pregnancies were so close together, making it very hard for her body, she couldn't help but be happy. If only Jacob felt the same. He really tried. Truly he did. He stayed with Sarah through it all, and it actually seemed like they were going to make it as a family of 9. That was until they got the news she was pregnant with triplets again. This was just too much for Jacob, and even though he loved Sarah very much, he just had to leave. It hurt him to leave Sarah on her own with 10 children, but frankly at that moment, he was more concerned about himself. He couldn't wrap his head around the fact that he would be raising 10 children, and the only thing he wanted to do was run away. So that's what he did. One morning, Sarah woke up to the sound of her children crying. This was how most of their mornings started, so that wasn't new. But when she saw Jacob wasn't in his bed and also not with the kids, alarm bells started going off inside her head. And when she saw all his clothes were gone, she knew. By the time Sarah had woken up, Jacob was already long gone. He had taken all his most precious belongings with him in his car and just drove off. He had no idea where he was going, but he just knew he couldn't stay. If only he had known what would happen in 20 years. After Jacob left, he didn't hear anything from Sarah ever again. Jacob moved to a whole different state and rebuilt his life. He married again and had 1 child with his new partner, a son named Brad. Everything was going great. He only thought about Sarah and how she and the children were doing once or twice a month, and he could live with that. But things were about to change. As Brad grew up, Jacob started to think about his other children more often too. He wondered how they were doing and what had become of them. And after 20 years, he realized his eldest daughter, Violet, was probably in college by now. Would she even remember him? After weeks of thinking about his old family, Jacob couldn't take it anymore. He hoped they would understand why he had left his first family and why he wanted to find them now. His wife couldn't believe he would do something that heartless to the woman he once loved, and even feared he would do the same again. But to her, she threw him out of the house and told him to make things right. Only then would she consider taking him back. Jacob knew his wife was right, and he had to fix the mistakes he had made. As he dialed her number, he felt his heart pounding in his chest. But sadly, the phone rang and no one answered. She didn't block his number, which was a good thing. But now he had no other choice but to go to their old family home and just hope for the best. It was a very long travel, 1 plane ride and an hour's drive to be exact. He parked his car a block away from their house, even though there was no way Sarah would recognize the vehicle, and slowly walked toward the house. He stood in front of the door for a minute or so before he finally had enough courage to ring the bell. The chaotic sounds from the other side grew louder, and he could hear children running to the door. This is it, he thought. I will finally see my kids again. The doorknob slowly turned, but as the door opened, Jacob was shocked. These children were way too young to be his. "Can I help you?" a woman's voice said from across the hall. That wasn't Sarah. It was clear Jacob was confused as the woman asked the question again. No, sorry, Jacob eventually said, and he turned around to walk away. But before the door closed shut, he turned around again. "Actually, do you happen to know what happened to the previous owners?" The woman frowned. She wasn't sure how to answer that question. Sorry? Jacob sighed and thanked the woman for her time. "Oh wait," the woman suddenly said, and she went inside again. Jacob wondered what it could be she had forgotten to tell him, and he curiously waited. He heard her walking up the stairs and coming down again after about 5 minutes. "Sorry for the wait, I had to go to the attic for this." She handed Jacob a rolled up piece of paper. "One of the people who lived here had left this after moving away. I don't know why I kept it, maybe for one of my children one day, but you might get more use out of it now." Jacob took the piece of paper and slowly unrolled it. "Thank you so much," he said as he looked at a poster from Yale. This was probably from his daughter, Violet. He excitedly walked to his car and typed in Yale's location. But he hadn't been the best father. Well, he actually hadn't even been a father to her at all. She was only 4 or 5 when he left. He couldn't even remember. But Jacob didn't want to give up on his children for a second time. The whole car ride, Jacob imagined how the meetup would be. She would probably be suspicious at first and most likely won't even recognize him. How would he ever find his daughter here? Heck, he didn't even know who her friends were. But then he heard a familiar name. Vi. Are you coming to George's party tonight? A girl excitedly asked another girl just a few feet away from Jacob. That had to be Violet, Jacob thought. Watched as Violet happily chatted with the other girl and then left toward the residence hall. Jacob didn't know what to do, so he decided to follow her. Violet used a special pass to open the front door, and Jacob silently rushed in a few seconds behind her, just in time before the door closed again. She took the elevator, so Jacob ran up the stairs, checking every hall to see if she got out of the elevator or not. Completely out of breath, he reached the 5th floor and watched Violet turn around a corner at the end of the hall. He rushed after her, but couldn't run anymore, or he would pass out. Jacob began knocking on the first door, but no one opened it. Then he moved on to the 2nd, the 3rd, and the 4th, but no one answered the door. He sighed and moved on to the 5th door, and luckily, he heard movement behind it. So not long after, a young man opened the door. Jacob asked him if he knew a girl named Violet, and the man hesitantly answered, yeah, there's this girl, Violet, who lives at the end of the hallway. Jacob thanked him and began walking. He knocked on the door and waited anxiously until it opened. Can I help you? A young woman asked. Jacob was starstruck. All he could say was, Violet. Violet frowned. Do I know you? She confusedly asked. That seemed to snap Jacob right back to reality. Well, Jacob began. I'm not sure how to say this, but I'm your father. He watched as Violet's facial expression changed. He tried, but she slammed the door shut. Jacob had seen this coming, but it still hurt. He couldn't blame her for being angry, but at the same time, he really wanted to talk to her. Violet, please listen to me. I'm here because I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for leaving you, your mother, and your siblings. Please listen to me. The door swung open again. I don't need your apology. I don't even want it. How dare you just show up at my door and expect me to listen to you? Violet, please. All I want is to apologize for my mistakes. Violet sighed. She could see the sadness on her father's face. Fine, she said. I'll give you mom's address. But if you're going to leave again, don't even bother going. Violet went inside and wrote an address down on a piece of paper. She returned, angrily shuffled it in Jacob's hands and closed the door again. Jacob looked at the paper and thought about what Violet had said. Don't even bother if you're going to leave again. Jacob knew he couldn't stay with Sarah and his other children. He had a wife and another child at home. All he wanted was to see how they were doing and give them a helping hand if needed. He decided to go anyway. He wouldn't just disappear from their lives again. Jacob drove to the address and was shocked when he arrived. Determinedly, he walked to the door. He wanted to knock, but let his hand hover in front of the door for a bit. Suddenly, he wasn't so sure of his decision anymore. He turned around to walk back to his car when he suddenly heard a voice behind him. Sarah, Jacob quietly said. He stood there frozen, and Sarah walked toward him. But she slapped him in the face and hugged him tightly after. She let go shortly after and looked him in the eyes. How did you find me here? Jacob began apologizing. He felt a wave of emotions flush over him as he looked into Sarah's eyes after all those years. He began to cry and couldn't stop. After letting everything go, he pulled himself together again. Sarah, I'm so sorry for what I've done to you. I've left you all alone with 10 children and with no one to lean on. He looked up at the house they were living in and looked back at Sarah. Sarah chuckled. Oh, this is what people call hard work pays off. Jacob blushed. Was she making fun of him? Sarah continued. After you left, I had no other choice but to work twice as hard as I already did. I hated you at first. I couldn't imagine why you would just leave me suddenly. But ultimately, it has made me into the person I am today. I was able to turn my life around by writing 2 best-selling memoirs about what you put me through. We never had to worry about money and, frankly, never missed having you around, Jacob thought. Jacob smiled through the pain. And the children, did they miss having me around? Sarah sadly looked at Jacob. Yes, the children suffered the most, but the 3 youngest ones really missed having a father around. Jacob looked down. It was hard hearing his children had suffered because of him. That was never his intention. He also felt torn. Seeing Sarah again brought back a lot of feelings he hadn't felt in a long time, and he wasn't sure what to do. He still felt a lot of love for her, but he also loved his wife back home. He didn't want to leave his children again, but he also didn't want to leave Brad. Jacob decided to stay with Sarah for a while, to get to know his children. He kept in close contact with his wife and called her every day with new stories about them. Within a year or so, Jacob lived together with his wife and Brad, only half an hour away from Sarah. His children, or whoever wanted to, could spend the weekends with him and even bond with Brad. Brad was a little younger than Jacob's 3 youngest triplets, but everyone got on great. Even Violet warmed up to Jacob after a while. He was able to go to her college graduation and make up for missed time. Jacob knew he could never turn back the clock, so he vowed to spend as much time with his children as he could, never missing a birthday again. And for Sarah, she stayed happily single. She loved the life she had built for herself in Jacob's absence and realized she was better off without him. Yet she was happy he had returned for the sake of their children. She could really see how a father figure in their life changed them for the better. The end.